For those familiar with the way of the samurai games, Samurai Western is essentially a spin-off of the series that takes place before the first game and even shares a few characters for its story. The premise is simple. You play as Gojiro, a samurai who travels to the USA to find his brother and discover why he decided to abandon the Bushido Code of Honor. When it comes to gameplay, it hugely differs from the games that have inspired it, and instead presents an arcade approach to its setup. The easiest comparison to make would be that of a beat-em-up, due to the simplicity that permeates Samurai Western right from the beginning up until the end. What makes all the difference here is the way Gojiro dodges or reflects the bullets, knives, or whatever the enemies will shoot at him. By pressing a button while running, Gojiro will dodge anything that might be coming at him. If you time it right, you can counter-attack enemies for maximum damage, and even make combos with it. Other than that, you've got a string of basic attacks, jumps, and also a limit break that once your limit bar is full, you can unleash a hidden power. This is most useful against the many boss fights that litter the adventure, and if used correctly, they can be overcome in a matter of seconds. What further helps Samurai Western excel is the inclusion of several RPG elements that expand the gameplay. There are several accessories for you to wear and take advantage of which boost your stats in combat, as well as a selection of weapons that offer different effects such as more damage or a higher degree of speed. These options allow the player to tailor Gojiro to their specific style of play whilst adding a nice amount of variety for those looking to switch it up. Put simply, Samurai Western is a fun game. If you can look past the flaws, none of which really affect the gameplay, you'll find playing Samurai Western to be an absolute joy. Twin Caliber takes many popular tropes of the horror movie genre and mixes it with comedy and an arcade-style hook that will keep you coming back time and time again. You take up the fight as John Fortman, a local sheriff who finds himself in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Faced with the impossible, he decides to spring an inmate and work together in the hopes of escaping the nightmare. At first glance, Twin Caliber looks like a mashup between Dynamite Decker and House of the Dead, but in fact it plays like neither. There are 26 levels in total, which play out in an on-rails fashion, and the player has access to 2 weapons at a time, which are controlled by the analog sticks of the controller. It might seem like an odd setup at first, but once you've had some time with the game, it's easily one of the most intuitive aspects of the experience, as the game is presented from a third-person camera that changes and shifts as the player progresses. Dotted lines are drawn at all times to show where each weapon is aiming. For those who might find it a bit difficult to keep track of each line, there is an option to tie both of them to one stick that makes it a bit more manageable, but in all honesty, it completely sucks all of the difficulty out of the game, and I found it much more rewarding to play how the developers intended. Ammunition is limited, but checkpoints which save progress and restock ammo and health are consistently spread throughout all levels, such that running out of ammunition is never a serious concern. Where Twin Caliber truly comes into its own though is within co-op. So much so it feels like co-op is the best way to play, as the action never lets up, and teamwork is the key ingredient to overcoming everything the game throws at you. If you've never got a chance to play it back in the day, there's never been a perfect time than now to try it out for yourself. Arguably, the most important aspect of any RPG is its story, and it's safe to say that Shadow Heart's Covenant more than delivers in this department. The player is immediately thrust into a world conflict setting, with events eventually proceeding to the small village of Domari, where you meet up with the hero from the previous game, Yuri. This sees him and your ever-expanding group of characters traversing Europe, seeking help, knowledge, and of course adventure. Now, the most unique part of Shadow Heart's Covenant is the combat system. Upon entering battle and selecting a move, you'll be presented with a ring that's made up of several hotspots. A needle runs through these spots, and hitting them correctly gives more power to your attack. This aspect alone adds so much to each encounter by providing a means to keep the player engaged no matter how trivial the enemy may be. As you would expect, as with any RPG, there's a ton of moves and magic spells to learn, with each having their own unique hotspots on the wheel. The special powers among the group are quite balanced and offer some depth to the already incredible combat system. Each character wields some of these special attacks, which at times are quite devastating and also beautiful to look at. As with many RPGs, side quests are also a big part of the game. Some of these quests are just for fun, and some others will help you earn items that cannot be earned anywhere else. Thanks to this, there's a huge amount of content to work through in the game, and thankfully it's all presented in a meaningful way, which nicely adds to the relationships relationships between the characters, and doesn't just feel like added fluff to pad out the playtime. As a huge fan of the genre, the Shadow Hearts series is a set of games that I feel always needs to get recognition. Unfortunately, they never managed to break into the mainstream and achieve success amongst the masses, but that's no reason not to try them out for yourself. If you see it on the cheap, Shadow Hearts Covenant is well worth picking up. Cold Winter begins with super spy Andrew Sterling, a former British agent in the MI6, who's captured by the Chinese government. The opening sees you breaking out of a prison with the help of an ally before you undertake the real mission, stopping all-out war. Now, most missions consist of going from A to B, while the enemy will do anything to stop you. Aside from mowing down the enemy with a machine gun you conveniently stole from the guard you just killed, Sterling will also have to plant explosives, hack into computers, and secure certain locations. It takes a back-to-basics approach to first-person shooting, adding innovation in only the fact that you can flip over tables and other pieces of the environment to provide cover. This inclusion is a pretty neat mechanic and allows you to get out of a tight spot if you ever find yourself surrounded. Something of a novelty in the game, and in my opinion its saving grace, is that you can collect bits of material to construct different special weapons. Get some rags, some bottles, and some gasoline, and you can make a Molotov. Pliers and some pieces of wire make a lockpick. This is really the game's only nod towards espionage, which provides a way for the player to take advantage of various options when it comes to each firefight. While the game didn't do anything too meaningfully innovative, it is definitely entertaining for anyone who enjoys the FPS genre, and although it might not be that visually impressive, the 8-hour or so campaign will entertain you, as the game is a simple shooter with no convoluted missions or overly difficult puzzles. The multiplayer may not be active nowadays, but anyone who needs a quick FPS fix with a cinematic story should pick this game up. Starting out life on the Super Nintendo, the Breath of Fire series has always strived to innovate with each and every release, and Dragon Quarter was no exception. It once again sees you playing the role of Ryu and trusty partner Bosch as they embark on a new mission, that being to breach the depths of the underground world and seed the sky. In true RPG fashion, it soon expands into a much larger tale, but unfortunately it ends up being the weakest part of the game. Thankfully though, the gameplay more than redeems any shortcomings you might have with the story, and evolves it in many intuitive ways when compared to the previous entries. The first improvement is the difficulty. It's challenging, and strategy becomes the real key. One of the biggest reasons why is that there are no ends, and the game is pretty stingy with healing items that mostly must be bought. There are no random battles. They start whenever you run into an enemy, so you must choose wisely, because you don't want to waste on what you have, taking out everything in sight, and get severely hurt only to run into a boss at the end. When it comes to battles, it plays more like a tactical strategy game than a turn-based RPG. Moving around the field and attacking costs you AP, and as you become stronger, the amount of AP your characters have will go up, granting you more opportunities to attack. No matter what type of battle you are fighting, each of these 3 party members are essential to your chance of victory. Now visually, there are really 2 aspects to Dragon Quarter's graphics, the setting and the characters. On the one hand, all you see are dingy passages, rusty pipes or worn down hallways. This world is a maze, and it is quite easy to get lost, especially because so many of the areas look so similar to each other. It's not the prettiest sight to behold, but at the same time it's an approach that Capcom took intentionally. On the other hand, we have these awesome cel-shaded anime character models that are all quite simple yet distinctive, and they stand out so vividly against the drab underground world where they come from. Although it's nowhere near one of the best RPGs on the system, Dragon Quarter is still one that deserves a spot in your library. Raging Blades is the definition of a gem. The rather bland box art hides what is one of the best beat-em-ups on the system, and no doubt contributed to its lack of notoriety. The story is surprisingly deep and revolves around a continent known as Atronach that had developed into a prosperous civilization. From the dawn of time, magic and technology have both been studied there and have brought great wealth. Then, suddenly, the gods disappeared and the world was plunged into war and chaos. Monsters appeared near the various ruins scattered over the continent and began destroying everything in their path. This is where the player comes in and has the choice of up to 4 characters to deal with the growing threat. Each of them have different fighting techniques and attack combos that makes trying them all out essential. You've got the heavy hitters, the sword masters, sorcerers, and kung fu champions, which all bring their own distinct flavor to the table. By the time the credits have rolled, you'll have earned another significant amount of characters that take the count up to 24 unique individuals, which adds a hell of a lot of replay value to the game. And that's not even mentioning co-op mode, which is where Raging Blades truly begins to shine. There are 3 difficulty settings to work through, with each option seeing the game get progressively more difficult as the player advances from start to finish. Each of the 9 levels are made up of several fight zones, and you must eliminate all enemies before moving on to the next, where players have to defeat bosses. These fights are a real standout and will no doubt test even the most proficient of players. If you're looking for a great co-op beat 'em up on the PS2, Raging Blades is a good option. The Grand Theft Auto games basically reshaped the gaming landscape. The kind of open, do-whatever-you-want type world that Grand Theft Auto 3 introduced really made you feel like you were in your own little world. As you would expect, this prompted other companies to throw their dog into the race, with Sony producing The Getaway, an open-world recreation of London with a cinematic focus. The Getaway is one of the few all-out action games you'll ever play that puts story before everything else. It's billed as a moviegoer's script, and tries to emulate the feel of a British gangster movie. Thankfully, it nails it for the most part. Gameplay is simple. It consists of driving to various places and killing enemy gangsters with the purpose of accomplishing certain tasks. A lot of the times you have restrictions like a time limit or have to use stealth like maneuvers to complete your mission, but the real bread and butter of the gameplay are the shooting mechanics. And this is where a lot of division around the game arose. When compared to something like GTA, The Getaway takes a more realistic and strategic approach to its gunplay. The use of cover is a huge aspect of taking on enemies, and allows you to use the environment to your advantage. Carefully approaching each situation is the order of the day, as it's so easy to get caught up in the fire and quickly meet your demise. Now, there's no way I could talk about The Getaway and not point out the incredible use of the hardware. This resulted at the time in one of the most impressive open-ended experiences on the console. The city feels like a believable space in which to play. Those who live in London, you'll come across recognizable brands and shops, as well as several landmarks that are lovingly recreated. Add to this the extreme attention to detail of the character models, and what you have is one of the most impressive games that ever saw the light of day on the PS2. If you never got around to playing this one when it first released, it's well worth picking up and giving it a go for yourself. Street Fighter is well known for setting the standard for 2D fighting games, but during the early PlayStation days it dipped its toes into the world of 3D with the EX series. The first 2 were released on the PS1, with the third entry making its way to the PS2 and taking advantage of all the extra power provided by the console. As with most games in the franchise, the player has the option to choose from several characters, as well as individual special attacks that can be chained together to create combos. This is where a lot of the fun comes from, by learning what sticks and building up a solid offense, as well as taking into account the different ways it allows you to defend yourself. There are some major inclusions that help EX3 stand out as well, the first noticeable one being the option to do the popular tag battles, which adds an unprecedented amount of strategy to each encounter, with the option of tagging in your other fighter if you're low on health. The other main new feature in the game is the meteor combos, which are just like hyper combos but last twice as long, do nearly 3 times the amount of damage. They require 3 full combo meters to pull off, and can turn the tide of a battle in a flash. As with most fighting games, everything is split up into a series of modes, with the main attraction being the original mode. Here you'll fight through a series of characters, and upon defeating them, you will have the option of letting them join your team. This allows you to switch between characters during a match, and score some serious combo potential. Original mode also sees you unlocking up to 8 hidden characters that make playing through it multiple times worth it, and helps the overall replay value of the game as a whole. Although it never quite reaches the heights of Tekken Tag Tournament or some of the other great fighting games on the PlayStation 2, Street Fighter EX3 is still a respectable game that any fan of the series will no doubt enjoy their time with. Valkyrie Profile was a huge hit on the PlayStation 1, so there were high hopes for the second entry. Unfortunately, it never managed to match the critical acclaim of the first game, and was considered a huge disappointment to many. One of the main reasons had to be the change of characters, which saw you taking up the fight as Alicia instead of the first game's hero Leonard. Although a prequel to Valkyrie Profile, some background knowledge from the first game is very helpful. The story is solid in itself, a tale of an epic war against the gods, but it never quite sticks the landing due to the lack of serious character development. The gameplay is arguably the best part of Valkyrie Profile 2, unless you're more focused on graphics, which are equally impressive. For the most part, the battle system is presented in real time. You run around the map as a character and your enemy moves after you. For a game of this difficulty level, this is good, as you can pretty much prevent an enemy from getting a single hit on you if you play your cards right. For attacking, you assign a single character to one of the face buttons, and when an enemy comes within your attack range, you unleash. If your timing is right, your special attack gauge will fill, and depending on who can use a finisher, you're free to absolutely decimate the enemy. These special attacks were a real highlight of the combat and managed to light up the screen in style and provide a means to stay in the fight no matter the odds. Valkyrie Profile 2 is a game that's not afraid to challenge you. You can easily spend 100 hours on the game, not to mention extra playthroughs and several secrets scattered throughout it. Overall, Valkyrie Profile 2 is a beautiful game, with a rich battle system to back it up. Some of the additions and subtractions may be a little hard to swallow for fans of the original, but that doesn't mean this game is any less compelling. It holds up well to the original and stands as a great addition to the series. The PS2 was home to many hack and slashers, the likes of God of War and Devil May Cry, with plenty of options for players to jump into. One that simply got overlooked and was left trapped on the PlayStation 2, however, was Blood Will Tell. If you're at all familiar with the popular anime Dororo, you'll notice that Blood Will Tell follows the events of the story. The basics are that the gods of darkness have been running amok for so long that the gods of light have lost their patience. Deciding enough is enough, they call for the birth of a child of light who will grow up to destroy the demons. This is where the player comes in and takes on the role of Hyakkimaru, the child called upon by the gods. At his birth, 48 fiends each stole a part of his body, and this is where the game sets you on a journey to retrieve them, beating each fiend as you go and ultimately casting out the evil of the kingdom. At first, the game seems like any other hack and slash game that you've played over and over again. There are special ideas incorporated into the game that make the gameplay fun and innovative. To start off, you can level up your weapons. Aside from Hyakkimaru's arm blades implanted in his body, you can also use normal swords and katanas. A simple click of the button will switch between the two. You can also use an arm gun for long-range attacks and a powerful leg cannon. As I mentioned, you can level up these weapons, increasing their power and usefulness. The range of available weapons is good, but an idea such as being able to buy movesets or combos would have been a solid inclusion. Overall, the game is great fun and well worth the money, and despite a couple of small issues, the game shines as an excellent achievement. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2, as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos, which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below, to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.